So recently on the podcast, we were and by the way, in case you didn't know, I have a podcast, in case you want to listen to it. Eugene and I were interviewing a guy named Henry Akins. And Henry Akins is a black belt under Rickson. He trained with Rickson way back in the day. And he was talking about a particular way that Rickson was training at any given time. And this particular way of training, this is something I do with my students, sometimes whether they know it or not, something I do with myself. And it's something that if you do this way of training, I think that it can create a lot of creativity in your game. It forces you to be more creative. And it can also be a way to take a technique that maybe has been working for you, and then all of a sudden it stops working on you because everybody knows what you're doing, and helps you find a way to make it work again. And a lot of times it teaches you ways to figure out how to get there. So check it out. Basically, Rickson would Babe Ruth it, so to speak. He would call a shot. So he would roll with these, people that are in his gym, and he would say, I'm going to submit you with this submission. Or he might ask the student, hey, what do you want me to submit you with? And the student might say, hit me with an arm bar. And then he might say, okay, well, what side? Right arm. Okay, right arm. And then he would go on to hit the person with the right arm over and over again, arm bar. And so what's useful about this is I do this all the time with my students where I will give them limitations to their submissions, and I let everybody know about the limitations at times. Think about this, like when you go to the gym, and I'm sure everybody's experienced this, you go to the gym and your coach teaches a really cool technique, right? And then afterwards you try to use that technique on someone. Well, it's really difficult if it's the move of the day because everybody's way more receptive to it. They know what's happening. So if you're like going for the grip that your coach showed, they're going to know what that grip means, and they're going to have a better chance of defending it. And so a lot of times what I'll do with the students is I might say, okay, like today, we have been doing rear naked chokes and back mount stuff for about 3 weeks. We're now moving into transitioning to arm locks. So we worked on some arm locks today, and I said, okay, guys, you can use arm locks or rear naked chokes for submissions. That's it. That's your only options. By doing this, what I'm letting everybody know, I'm letting them know the weapons that are available at their disposal to submit them. And then this way you know what you need to defend. And when that happens, people get way more thoughtful about their back. They get way more thoughtful about their arms and everything else. And so you got to be very mindful. And what it ends up doing is it forces you to be more creative about the way that you go about the submissions, because you're not going to be able to do just the same old thing that you've been doing or the same thing that they were taught, because they're going to know what's happening. And likewise, by not giving them an option to get out of it, it's going to force the creativity, because here's what a lot of people do. Someone might have a technique that's working for them. All of a sudden they run into that obstacle. Everybody in the gym knows they're going for it, so they learn how to defend it. Boom, it doesn't work anymore. A lot of people at this point, they give up. And unfortunately, this is at the very point you need to push through, because if you can get through this and you can keep doing this, those techniques become very good. When you find like a dozen different ways to make a technique work, that technique's hard to stop, because then it gives you tons of different approaches. It's like if the person can sort of get a scent, they can sniff the trail that you're coming down, then they can block it. But all of a sudden, if you throw them off the scent and you go a different way, it's very hard to predict where you're coming from, even if it's the same move. And so, again, if you're not in control of your training, you may not be able to do that exactly like it was. But you can think of it this way. One, you could sometimes let your training partners know what you're doing. If you're a higher belt, it would be a great way to say, hey, talking to maybe a blue belt or white belt or something like that, say, hey, I'm going to go for an arm bar and I'm going to try to hit you with this from guard or whatever. And let them know. So it makes it very hard for you to get to it. Likewise, if you're in the gym and you're using a technique over and over and over again, and all of a sudden everybody knows that you're the guillotine person, you're the triangle choke person, whatever it might be. When they stop it, doesn't mean stop using it. That's the exact point where you need to double down on it sometimes. Not always. Sometimes it's better to experiment, but sometimes it's better to double down, because then what ends up happening is you have to get creative. You got to figure out a different way to make things work. And again, that's where a lot of times this creativity spurs from, because you don't give yourself a choice. And a lot of times people they give up too early. And so again, it's an interesting idea. It's a way that I train personally a lot of times, because I'm using the same moves for months at a time. I've talked about this on the channel multiple times. So this is it's not a very complicated idea, but it's a very simple one. It's a very effective one. And I think that if you actually implement it, if you take a technique and it's a technique you're pretty good with, and you just keep doing it for months and months and months on end, you have no choice but to get better with it. But again, most people don't keep that kind of focus with their game for too long. So anyway, that's the idea, guys. Just wanted to share the idea with you today. Hopefully it's useful to you, and I'll talk to you next time.